Hi everyone. We have a couple of PDF files. There's actually four that I attached to this week's final kind of engagement with some of the data. We still have a set of lessons for next week, but there's no assignments connected to it, so it's really up to you to engage in a process of going through some of the material. I think you find very interesting and very important the issue of ethics and the issue of conceptual elements. But here today and this week, we are still addressing, I think, some overall issues with research analysis and research coding and themes and all that. And I wanted to start with a PDF that says kind of an overview, okay? And when you open the PDF, it would be great if you could do and stop this video for now, and then go and open on Blackboard that PDF. I'll give you a second to do that. And you're going to see that we'll go over together some of these things. Okay, then there's several. There's about the first PDF. There are 5 pages to it, and I would like to talk to you a little bit about that. Okay, so go ahead and do that. Pause it. Go see. Open the PDF. Okay. Now that you open the PDF and we're ready to go, I want you to take a look at the first one, and you can rotate if you need to do that. The first one, again, reminds us of this, the research process cycle, right? And you see that you have, when we have been talking about that, identifying the problem, and in my conversations with you this past week and on a one-on-one basis, one of the things that we thought about is what is the problem that you're trying to address, right? What is the purpose of what you're trying to do? How do you justify what you're trying to do? And then we spend a lot of time talking about the literature review, how the literature review contextualizes what you're trying to do, to locate the resources, you select the resources that are significant, you bring them together. It's not a collection of articles that summarize, but it's really something that helps you to make a case for particular specific issues that you're trying to address, right? That this all starts with this idea of the research question and links back into the research question, right? Which follows. And then we collect data, right? And we started thinking about that, how last week, what is it that's the coding takes place? How is it that we organize amidst all this data? How do we collect data? We'll collect data through interview, through journaling, through documents, through observations, right, or through a survey, right? And as you see here, we go through this process, and part of the analysis, which is on the left-hand side, is kind of then breaking down this data. And the key issue for coding, as we're going to see here today, is how do you break that down? How you break that data down? How do you organize that data? And that's really dependent on the kind of ideas that you have in your head. And next week, in the final week, you're going to see this issue of paradigms and themes, and how the formation of particular paradigms, particular ideas, is really significant, or how you then can organize the kinds of informations that you have, right? And that then helps you to report on it, which we will do in the future when you sign up for either thesis or for the capstone. I'm going to report in terms of the capstone something that's much more practical oriented, right? Something that is about practice and is about changing the way we do the teaching. And then the research, the thesis side, if you decide to go that route, it's going to be much more of the academic structure and how do we organize that, right? But in both ways, you have to decide who's your audience, how you're going to structure the process, and of course, we have to write it sensitive, right? The second page, if you look back, you're going to see that one of the interesting things is, is this issue of research question. And if you're still thinking, and a number of you have revised or asked you to revise the research questions, one of the interesting things and important things is that your research question really, Bernafort, who wrote this book on action research, which I think is very helpful, talks about 4 core principles. And it has to have real questions. What are the questions that you want to ask? They're not, something that's very elaborate. It doesn't need to be that. But think about what, in what ways this is, this idea has an impact. What happens when? What is the impact of? Right. So those are the kind of key questions, and they need to be real questions. that you have, and particularly things that you don't know about. There's no point of engaging with the research that you already know the answer. You already have a sense of it, right? Obviously, you have a pathway and you have an idea, but the key part of this process, the key hope that organizes this is that you're trying to engage with something that goes beyond what you already know. And as significant that these are not engagements with yes or no questions, right? So we want to have something that's really meaningful and significant. You see that I marked on these PDFs, right? These elements, and what we see, we go little by little through reorganizing the research questions from something that's very big and kind of abstract, do LD and ADHD, right? Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Students engage in meaningful discussions during literary circles, right? So you have an idea of who is the target population, the ADHD students. We deal with this issue of what is meaningful and not, and you're going to see how that comes back. And then, of course, we have a context, what the literature circles, right? You see how this changes. First, talking about what does it mean to engage with an open-ended question, right? So the first question is do, which means yes or no question, right? The next question is what happens, which now became an open-ended question, right? And then we revise, continue to do more. One of the interesting things I found is at the bottom of the page where it talks about meaningful. And then if you go into the next question, you know, so we have sometimes we throw these adjectives, right? And we try to qualify them because it looks interesting, it looks smart, but then we need to define, and this is, for those of you engaging with Kathy, is a very Kathy question, is what does meaningful mean, right? And that's part of what that process is. But then, you know, you go to the next page and you see that the final question then becomes what happens when students identified with special needs will really change that very specific, very narrow thing, LD or ADHD, engage in discussions during the reading materials. We're no longer talking about the idea of meaningful, right? We're just laying out this really important question. There's not a yes or no answer question, and this is really significant because what we're going to do and how we're going to collect data, it's directly related to this, right? So if you go to the next page, then we see the certain things that I've been talking about and we have been doing, and it's going to be a significant part of how you organize your methods section, right? So which is, you have a series of figures there that talk about observations, interviews, documents, audio, video materials. All those are sources of materials for a qualitative research, and the quantitative research that we have talked about is based on a survey, right? So what is important here in this in page 4 is that you see, for instance, in observations, we have observations as a participant, or as just as an observer, as more one than other, as an outsider or an insider. Those are questions you need to ask and you talk about if you're going to use observations. Interviews or questionnaires, they're two different things. If you're doing an interview, are you doing an unstructured, open-ended? Are you doing an unstructured but you audio or videotaping? You're doing semi-structured, which means that it has a little bit of a kind of set of questions predetermined, or it's not just an interview, right? But in the traditional sense of the word, but it's something that is laid out, and now you follow some of that script, but you also go beyond. Is it a group interview, a focus group? Right, a focus group is people that have a kind of a same set of affinities, and then you get some more discussion-based opinions. Right, and open-ended is more directed. Again, same thing with documents and audio video materials are highlighted, all these important things. There are sources for, right, that you can select, and then you need to go back and kind of take a look at what the researchers like Crasswell and others in your research of when you're going to define those sources, right? But the important thing again is to have, if you go to the next step, is that you have these steps, and one of the key things here are the thick description, so that as you're describing later on, as you're talking about, and this is going to lead to the sense of validity, which is really significant, it's important, and there's a video later on we're going to watch about validity. But it really also connects to this idea of triangulation, which this explains very succinctly and very significantly. So we have more than one source, right? This happens the same thing in the literature review, and will happen also when you're collecting data. So you organize, you code all that data, you collect it from very specific samples that you determine, and now you try to build this from different standpoints, right? So at least 3 different standpoints, from the standpoint of a student or a teacher, a colleague, or an outside observer, for interviews from 3 different people, right? So we build that sense of complexity that helps us to have a real sound research protocol. Okay, so hopefully that's another kind of nice review that leads us into this thinking about how do we think about the collection of data and organization of data, and what are all the things that we need to be thinking before we go into sampling and coding and triangulation, so forth and so on. Okay, sounds good. I'll see you later. There's more to come here. So the idea, again, is see the PDF, watch the video, read back the PDF. Okay, so we'll kind of go back and back to back in each one of those.